been over a decade, and yet there are still no answers as to what happened to the 27-year-old medical student from Ohio who walked into a bar in March 2006 to have a night with friends and disappeared without a trace. My name is Elizabeth, and today I will be discussing the bizarre disappearance of Brian Randall Shaffer. Brian Shaffer was born to parents Randy and Renee Shaffer on the 25th of February 1979. He was the oldest of two children, with the younger of the two also being a boy named Derek. Brian and his family lived in Ohio, and he and his brother were raised in Pickerington. I was not able to find much on Brian's upbringing and younger years before university, other than that he graduated from high school in 1990. After high school, Brian attended Ohio State University and graduated 6 years later with a degree in microbiology. In 2004, already having a degree under his belt, he began studying at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. Alongside medicine, Brian also had an interest in music. He played the guitar, and he told his friends that his real ambition was to start a band. While attending Ohio State, Brian met a woman named Alexis and they began dating. They had a trip to Miami planned for April 2006 during spring break, and Alexis strongly believed that Brian was going to propose, as did his family. Unfortunately, before this could happen, Brian's life, which seemed to be going so well, was rocked as his beloved mother, Renee, died of a rare form of bone cancer in March 2006. She died in the early weeks of 2006. Brian, on the outside, seemed to be handling her death well, but according to friends, he was finding it quite difficult, as I suppose any person would when they lose a parent. On Friday, March 31st, 2006, Brian had just finished his exams and spring break had officially begun. Brian was planning on celebrating with his brother Derek, but Derek and his wife cancelled their plans. So, in the need of a new plan, Brian contacted his former roommate and friend William Clint Florence, who agreed to go out. Now, every source that I've seen has called William Clint, which is what I'm going to be referring to him as for the duration of this video. Before he could meet up with Clint, Brian went for dinner with his father, Randy. Randy said after Brian went missing that Brian appeared tired, which isn't really surprising, as Brian had been doing exams all week and probably had some late nights. Randy wanted to tell Brian to go home and get some rest instead of going out with Clint, but he refrained from doing so. You have to remember that Brian at this point was 27 years old and was well capable of making his own decisions. They finished their dinner and parted ways. It would be the last time that Randy would ever see his son. Brian met Clint at 9 p.m. at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, which was a seafood restaurant and bar located on the second floor of the South Campus Gateway complex on High Street. On the night that Brian was there was construction going on outside the bar. The Ugly Tuna itself was a large room with a bar located in the middle, and to get to the main entrance you had to go up like an escalator, turn right and walk across a large hallway type of space. Anyone entering this way would be caught on CCTV. It's really important to note this. The only other way to get in or out of the bar was through an emergency exit, which was located right near where the construction was happening, and this area was not under surveillance. Basically, if anyone went through this exit, they would end up in a construction area. At around 10 p.m, Brian rings Alexis, who is visiting family in Toledo, and tells her that he loves her and will see her when she gets back. Nothing appeared unusual about the phone call. According to Alexis, everything seemed normal and fine. Clint and Brian spent the night bar hopping, and they worked their way down to the Arena District. At each bar, they both had one shot of liquor, according to Clint. A friend of Clint, Meredith Reed, joins the boys around midnight at the North Shore bar. The trio later head back to the Ugly Tuna Saloon because there was a live band playing who they wanted to see. They were going to have their final few drinks here before calling it a night and heading home. At around 1:15am, Brian, Clint and Meredith arrive at the Ugly Tuna as seen on CCTV footage. They're seen coming up the escalator. Brian is in the front with the other two following behind. Brian separates from the group shortly after arriving, and there has been some sources claiming that Brian told Clint he was going to speak to the band, but I'm not sure if this has ever actually been confirmed or not. Brian was seen on CCTV at 1:55am speaking to two girls outside the Ugly Tuna before heading back toward the bar entrance. I think it's been reported that he may have known these two girls, he was kind of friendly with them, and it was just a friendly conversation. You can see the CCTV footage if you look it up online. He seems fine, normal, it just seems like a friendly chat. After he speaks to these two girls, like I said, he heads back towards the entrance of the bar, although I read somewhere that you never actually see him go in. It's just assumed that that's where he was going because that's where he headed back to. Honestly though, there isn't many other places he could have went to besides back down the escalator, so we're assuming that he went back into the bar. This is the last time that Brian was seen. Clint and Meredith realised that they couldn't find Brian, so they do search for him. They have a quick look around the bar, they check the bathrooms, and they try to phone him, but they had to leave at 2am as the bar was closing. So they waited for him outside thinking that he'd be out in a few minutes, and they tried to call him again, but he didn't pick up. Eventually they kind of just assumed that he'd probably left and went home without telling them, so they too leave. They are captured on CCTV at 2:09am and I'm heading down the escalator to the parking garage where Meredith's car was parked. The next morning, which was Saturday morning, Alexis rang Brian but got no answer. Like, she assumed he was just still sleeping after his night out and wasn't concerned. He had just finished his exams, was on spring break, and she knew he was going out, so she probably just assumed that he had a lot to drink and was still sleeping. She continued to call him throughout the day, but it was going straight to voicemail, so the phone was not even ringing, which means that Brian's phone either died or was switched off. The next day, which would have been the Sunday, my mistake. After still not hearing from Brian, Alexis rang his father, Randy, and told him that she couldn't get hold of Brian. Randy tried to contact his son, but he couldn't get in contact with him either. So Randy goes to Brian's apartment, but he's not there. His car is still outside though, and everything is in its place. Just no sign of Brian. Brian and Alexis were due to go to Miami the next day, which would have been the Monday. This is the trip that Alexis thought that Brian was going to propose to her on. And Alexis actually goes to the airport hoping that Brian would just turn up, and everything would be fine and it would have all been a big misunderstanding and they'd go on their holiday. But he never did. It was shortly after this that Brian Shaffer was reported missing. Searches immediately began at the Ugly Tuna and went outwards. Every nearby alley, dumpster, they were all searched, but nothing was found. Search dogs were also called in, and there was extensive searches of the Olentangy River carried out, but still there was absolutely no sign of Brian. Police spoke to local business owners and neighbours hoping for any information, but no one had any to offer. It was as if Brian just disappeared, and Brian looked like an ordinary guy. He wouldn't have really drawn attention to himself unless there was something to draw attention to, like a fight, whether it be verbal or physical, but no one seemed to have anything. Missing persons posters were made up and distributed, hoping to jog someone's memory. Police also checked Brian's apartment, just like Randy, but they found everything in its place. His car was still outside and Brian had not been home. If he had been home, he had gotten up and made his bed and left again because everything was in its place, or else he just never slept in his bed. Hospitals were searched for any record of Brian checking in or out, but no one matched his description and his name wasn't used. Police took to CCTV footage to look for answers. Columbus at the time was the most surveyed city in Ohio, and police knew that he would have had to have shown up somewhere. However, there was no footage of Brian anywhere in the area that night. The last sighting of Brian was outside the bar speaking to the two girls at 1:55 a.m. He was never captured on CCTV footage anywhere else. This led police to believe that Brian Shaffer never walked out of the Ugly Tuna Saloon that night. The footage has been extensively investigated by police. They speculated at one point that maybe Brian had changed his clothes to avoid being detected by cameras. I'm not too sure why he would have done this, but that was just a theory that they had. This was discredited eventually by Detective Andre Edwards though, who accounted for every person entering and leaving the bar that night one by one. The only person who entered but never left was Brian, at least not through the main entrance. Brian could have found another way out of the bar, like I said earlier about the emergency exit. Now, the construction that was taking place outside the bar was not under surveillance. The door, however, was not easy to get to, or wasn't easy to get out of. It's said that it would have been nearly impossible for someone who was not under the influence to get to it, never mind someone who had at this point had quite a few drinks. According to Clint, they had a shot at every bar they went to, so you would assume that Brian would be quite intoxicated by the point he would have been at the entrance if he went to the exit. It was not out of the question still though, but why would Brian go out through the construction door instead of the main entrance? It would have led him to the back street. Maybe he thought that going out the entrance and through the construction site would have been faster. But you also have to consider that the search dogs did not pick up Brian's scent at the construction site, and police found no sign of him ever walking through there. Clint and Meredith were of course questioned by police, and they were asked to take a polygraph test to rule them out. Meredith agreed, and as far as I know, she passed. Clint, however, refused and lawyered up not long after. This brought a lot of speculation that Clint was somehow involved with Brian's disappearance, something that Brian's family and Alexis actually agree with. There is no evidence, however, that Clint wanted to harm Brian. There was no evidence that they ever had any issues, and just because someone gets a lawyer does not automatically mean they are guilty of anything. But at the same time, just because there's no evidence doesn't mean that he's not guilty, so take that with a little pinch of salt. Randy was also asked to take a polygraph test, and he passed. Randy was just asked simply because he had been with Brian at some point throughout that night. The two women who were speaking to Brian outside the bar at 1:55 a.m. were questioned, but they were never asked to take a polygraph test because police just didn't believe that they had anything to do with Brian's disappearance. I think maybe they probably should have been given a polygraph test, because at this point Clint and Meredith had already lost Brian. They already didn't know where he was, so these two girls were the last known people to speak to Brian before he disappeared. So I don't know, maybe they should have probably been given a polygraph test. At this point, Randy was naturally desperate for answers, and the investigation was going nowhere. Randy turned to a psychic who said that Brian's body would be found in water. Due to this, Derek, Randy and many other people spent hours searching along the shores of the Olentangy River, but again there was no sign of Brian. Brian's girlfriend Alexis continued to call Brian's phone for months after his disappearance. It always went to voicemail except for one time. While doing her routine calling, something she did every night before bed, the phone rang 3 times. Brian never answered the phone, however, but it still rang. This gave Alexis hope that maybe Brian was alive out there somewhere. Brian's phone provider has said that this was a problem with the service on their end, so this led nowhere. Renee's death and Brian's disappearance was not the last heartbreak in the Shaffer family. In September, Randy Shaffer, Brian's father, was killed in a freak accident. A comment posted under his obituary online said, "Dad, I love you, Brian," and was posted in the US Virgin Islands. This comment was naturally investigated by authorities and ruled to be a hoax. It was actually written from a public computer in Franklin County, which was in Columbus, so it was just a cruel prank. Derek Shaffer, Brian's brother, is the only surviving immediate member of the Shaffer family. He has been quite silent on Brian's case since his father's death, but it is important to remember that he lost his mother, his brother and his father within 2 years of each other in very tragic circumstances each time. So maybe he just needs to take some time out and just deal with his loss. There are many theories brought up and discussed when it comes to Brian's disappearance. Some I think are more plausible than others, but I'm going to go through some of them now. Theory number 1 is that Brian left the bar and met with foul play. In this scenario, Brian would have had to have left through the construction door, as the main entrance was ruled out. He did not leave through the main entrance. Not only would he have to make his way through the construction area, but he'd also have to get out the door undetected, which would be a pretty tricky task given how much surveillance was in the outside area. Say he did somehow manage to leave the bar unnoticed and then get through the streets without being detected by any CCTV, he would then have had to run into some sort of trouble and again not be seen by anyone. I'm just not too sure how much I buy into this theory. I just think the whole thing would be too coincidental for it to have been an accident. Maybe I could get more on board with it if he was killed by someone he knew, but him first of all deciding to go out the emergency exit through the construction site for no apparent reason, then him just so happening to be lucky enough to not get picked up on any CCTV cameras doing so, and then to meet with a random stranger who kills him, I just find that too much. There's also the theory that Brian may have fallen victim to the smiley face killer. I'm thinking of doing a video on them, and although Brian does seem to kind of fit the demographics of what the supposed smiley face killers look for, I'm just not too sure how much I buy into this for this one. I'm not too sure how much I buy into the smiley face killer in general, but for this I definitely don't buy into it. Theory number 2 is that Brian never left the bar. Now this is a bit sad and kind of creepy, but there's a reason why whenever Brian's case pops up, it's along the lines of a man walks into a bar and never comes out. And that's because there's no definitive evidence that Brian even left the bar that night. So maybe he never actually left. This theory ranges from Brian being accidentally or purposely murdered by workers in the bar and hidden in the walls or under the floor, to him accidentally injuring himself while trying to navigate the construction area and being buried under concrete. If I had to pick which side of this theory I believe the most, it would be that he died while trying to get out of the construction door and was covered with concrete as he was not seen. Again though, I'm not sure. I just definitely believe that side of the theory than workers killing him in a packed bar with people around for no apparent reason. But I'm not sure. It is kind of sad to think that maybe he is exactly where he was 14 years ago, but again, the police never found any evidence of him being there and search dogs never picked up a scent at the area, so we really don't know. And then the third theory that I'm going to talk about, and the one that I actually buy into the least, is that Brian left his life or ended his life. This theory is that Brian either willingly walked away or ended his life. Brian had a hard time recently. His mother had only died weeks earlier. His friends said he was struggling, but would he have taken his own life? I find it hard to believe, as everything suggests he was looking forward to the future, and I also find it hard to believe that his body still would not have been found 14 years later if he had committed suicide. The other side of this theory is that Brian left on his own accord. Niall Rosenberg, who was attorney to Clint, wrote to a private investigator not long after Randy's death stating he believed Brian was alive. He stated, quote, "If Brian is alive, which is what I'm led to believe after speaking with the detective involved, then it is Brian and not Clint who is causing his family pain and hardship. Brian should come forward and end this." End quote. I find this hard to believe. Again, Brian seemed to be looking forward to the future and did not seem to have any reason to run away from his life that we know of that's in the public. It would also be a strange time to do so, considering he had a lot of alcohol at this point, he had no car, the money that he would have been the money that was on him, because it's important to note that Brian's phone, credit cards and bank accounts have never been used. So he would have been relying on money that he had on him, and I just don't believe it, which makes Clint look even more suspicious that his attorney is really trying to pin the whole Brian is alive thing. I just don't understand how he would remain undetected for 14 years, especially get through the city. When it comes to the theories, I'm not too sure which one I buy into. I think they all could be some bit plausible, but then at the same time I'm like, none of them could be plausible. This case is really one of the most confusing cases I've ever come across before, and I don't know what to believe when it comes to any of the theories. Brian Shaffer was last seen on the night of March 31st, 2006 and the early hours of April 1st, 2006. The last time Brian was seen, he was wearing an olive green short-sleeved polo shirt over a white long-sleeve shirt, blue jeans, white Adidas sneakers and a yellow rubber cancer awareness bracelet. He is 6'2" and weighed 165 pounds. He is Caucasian male with light brown hair and hazel eyes. He has a tattoo of a Pearl Jam symbol on his upper right arm. He wears wired framed glasses. Brian has a black spot on his left iris, and he is classed as an endangered missing person. If you have any information on the disappearance of Brian Randall Shaffer, all the necessary information to contact the correct authorities will be in the description box down below. Thank you for taking the time to listen to Brian's case. I'm sure it would mean a lot to his family to still know that people are thinking about him after a decade. It really is such a sad case, just because of all the other traumatic events that came along in that family, and I think it's time that Brian came home. Thank you for giving his case a moment of your time, and I will speak to you in my next video. With this case and with all my cases, I am going to be typing them up into a blog post. I'm going to take my script and take them and just put it into a blog post, and the description to that will be in the description if you'd like to read this information as well. I hope you're having a great day, and I will speak to you in my next video. Bye.